some reason, Rob wanted me to introduce myself. I'm not doing anything tonight, but my name is Brian Silver. I am technically in Trek 2 right now, and hopefully going to be church planting in the near future. Getting close to finishing up my assessment process with Acts 29, if you're familiar with them, and might be starting it with Converge as well. So anyways, that's me, in case you were wondering. My wife and I, we've been married 5 years, so that's been pretty cool. No kids, so we like to have, I don't know, this topic that we're talking about tonight, singleness, dating, relationships, marriage. Obviously, it's very important, and the cool thing about a topic like this is it actually like applies and pertains to everybody, so you can't really zone it out at any moment, so that's kind of cool. So that's what we're talking about tonight. It's incredibly important. You guys are you're in a stage of life that it's a big deal. Some of you are making some very big decisions, whether you're single or dating or engaged. It's life-changing, and you don't want to make the wrong decision, right? So anyways, we'll do that. So a couple announcements. There is a leaders dinner next month. So on the 8th, that second Sunday at 5 p.m. So leaders dinner at 5 p.m. Just so you know. I'm assuming it'll be here, right? I would assume it would just be right out here. We'll eat and then just go right to our session. So just remember that. And then supposed to remind you, especially leaders, use the city to try to talk to your cohort and talk to your peeps. It's a good way just to communicate and share resources, that kind of thing. So make sure you're doing that. There is room on the back of your first page. Did everyone get a handout, by the way? Did everyone get one? Needed one? Wanted one? Okay. There's room for notes, I guess, in the back of the first page. So you need one? I'm going to steal one from here. So hopefully no one will sit down. Okay, that's it. So I'm going to turn it over to them. So all of you, I think you know Benji. Are you going to introduce yourself? Yeah. Okay. All right. Benji's going to introduce himself. He's a rock star. He's super humble, so he will never say that.
So I'll introduce myself.
So without further ado.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm excited to be here. So thank you guys for making it here. And a lot of prep has been gone into this one. So getting these 6 on here is very hard work. So, and especially the stage. I hope they don't fall backwards. It's not a trap door bar, you're safe.
Don't do that again.
So a couple things. People asked me to put a slide about about me, my life, which can take a whole hour, but I decided to just do one slide. It's actually last minute stuff here, so I actually put on something from I work in the Center for International Health and Immigrant and Refugee Health, so I actually put up a slide like this one. Coming up. There we go. So, you guys see the slide?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So, what we're looking at here is the world map. Yeah? Okay. So, when I work with immigrants and refugees, I'm a physician. I work at Health Partners in the University of Minnesota Medical School. So what we do is work with folks in different areas, and I try to just put a map of places I've been to. And this is not I was born and raised in the Middle East. If this works. Right here. Oh, there we go. Middle East is right here. Okay? And I was born in a country called Bahrain. Bahrain is a little dot. You won't see it on there. And so I ended up doing this. All right? So that's blowing up the Middle East and India. So my heritage is from India.
Don't say blowing up the Middle East.
I'm going to have fun with this panel. So after blowing up the Middle East, I have this. So a little dot that's the smallest, one of the smaller dots is the country I was born in. And during the Gulf War, I immigrated here. My heritage is from India, so a lot of my trips were there. So some of my biases will be from arranged marriage backgrounds, etc. So I have a different perspective on that. That's why I asked these guys to speak to you. So we'll have that coming into play. So someone asked me to put pictures of my family. I had a hard time finding them on my phone because there's the secured phone. So I found some pictures. And this is me and my wife. So this is a couple years ago. We were in the Middle East. And it's my beautiful wife there, Carey. She's a pediatrician, and yeah, she's great. So, and I have a couple other young specialists in our home as well. This is my son. He's a specialist in having fun. And he's a kindergartner, and he's a blast. He has a ton of energy. I have a daughter who's a specialist at being funky, especially with Doc McStuffins. Has anyone heard of Doc McStuffins? Oh, she loves that. So, and lastly, we picked up this little girl walking across the river one day. Her name is Elaine. She's a cutie, so she's just trying to walk in. So that's my family. Enough about me, but we're going to get started with a roadmap here. So roadmap for today. You know, this is our, I'm going to be pretty optimistic. We'll get through some of this, okay? So disclaimer first, we're going to go through ground rules and background. We're going to hit dating. Now all of these are going to be having some level of overlap, so just be, allow us the freedom to do that. Sometimes we'll talk about marriage, sometimes we'll talk about singleness and dating. So it's not all just going to stay in little perfect zones for you guys who want that. I actually hate that because I have this type A personality. I want it in chunks, but it won't be like that. Dating, singleness, marriage. Each time it'll be a reflection time. I hope you're sitting with your cohorts, kind of. If you're not, when during that reflection time, come to meet your cohorts. The only other thing I'd say, you saw the website at the beginning. We used it last time, todaysmeet.com. Go to that and start a conversation. I call it the back channel conversation. That's a conversation that we can't get a hold of everyone. It's a large group. So we use it in the medical school. I hope it worked. It worked last time. So have those conversations behind the scenes. I'll check on it, or you guys can check on it behind the scenes, and we'll talk with the panelists. We'll bring those conversations up as well. All right? todaysmeet.com/off-road. You guys got that? Yeah? All right. So this is the optimistic slide. This is the pessimistic slide coming up. Okay? I'm not in any way endorsing that I claim to be the expert on this subject. I don't think, maybe some of these guys are experts on the subject, but I think singleness, dating, or marriage. I
treated them well.
That's the expert. End of discussion.
So we're all on a journey together, right? I think that's, just take that caveat. So, and the second disclaimer, we will get many things covered. I may not even hit at your primary issue. The last part, you will leave here unsatisfied. And some of you upset. Woo! And some of this, I think, anyway, I used to say this in a small group, you will leave probably with more questions than answers, and I hope that's okay. And have that caveat set as well, all right? And so we can all spend a ton of time on the subject, but let's keep moving along. Off-road demographics, all right? You guys know each other a little bit. Let me see, I had a couple of sleuths who looked up all this research for me. And there's 23 women, 32 men. Yeah, at least you identify. Okay. There could be some offshoots from that and say what kind of men you are, but all right. A little shot there. Average age of women about 26. Average age of men 26. Perfect. Look at that. Rob's doing some recruiting, I think, based off that. So there's 11 single women. Again, if you had questions about the source, go to robcc.com. 15 single men. Now, 4 women dating men. I don't know how we got that data, but 4 women are dating men. Okay. And 8 men are dating women. So I'm not sure if that's, I think it's separate from the single men question, so I think it is separate. So, and there are 9 married men here, 7 married women, 2 married with children, and no divorcees at this point. Lastly, we looked at Hope Community Church at large. And there's 598 single women there, and 450 single men. Obviously, we can't count the single men perfectly. It's 450, it's rounded. And 1,500 total. That's a large swath of people. So the hope here is we're going to address questions kind of based on that kind of angle. Majority will be spent on kind of you'll see the angle we're taking. All right? So this. Let's see if this plays. My feeble attempt at playing clips. Obviously can't play it. Here we go. Let's go to this one. Stick away from this. I can do it. Let's play this one first. At least it's playing. David did say it's embedded, so we'll see.
I can see.
We got it.
doing?
Glenn?
Hi, Sam. How are you? That's nice. I was wondering if you would like to go on a activity with me tomorrow.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Great. Bye. Meet me in the forest.
That's pretty good for that one. Let me see if I'll take a moment to do this next one, see if it works. Otherwise, I love the pulling time, so we got come on.
So you and Janet still together? No, not really.
You can listen to it at least.
What is it? Well, she's jealous. Says I'm living too much in 82. I dumped her. What about your girlfriend? Well, things are getting pretty serious right now. I mean, we chat online for like 2 hours every day, so I guess you could say things are getting pretty serious.
That's pretty good. So you get the gist of it. So if you watch that movie, that's pretty hilarious. So, all right, we're gonna get started here. So, part one. See you. All right. I only have 6 pages of questions for you guys, so we'll get started here. So, what we're gonna do is introduce the panel here just a little bit. We're gonna have you guys go around. Questions. I'd love to have you guys just say your name, how long you've been coming to Hope. Where is home for you? What do you do with most of your time? So, maybe David, wait over there. I've spent more time with David. Actually, scanned the internal parts of his body this week. Probably more time with him than my wife. So, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, his heart was very generous.
I thought you just wanted me because of my body. I was an ultrasound model for Benji's, one of his courses that he teaches over at the hospital. So my name is David Ruess. I'm 29 years old. I've been going to Hope for about 6 years. And what else? Majority of my time is spent doing LDI and then doing some web design on the side as well. So that's me.
I'm Oawsters, and we've been coming here since it started. And I do Restoring Hope here, so I work at Hope.
Yeah, my name is Oawsters. We've been married for 26 years.
Flown by.
Oh, bye. We met at Bethel. We're a Bethel couple. Not bad. People out there? Any Bethel people out there at all? Yay, one person. Anyways, we're a Bethel couple. What else? Oh, majority of my time I work at Wells Fargo as an organizational development consultant. I do part-time teach at Northwestern. Yeah. Northwestern? And then, which of course pays for all the funds for my kids to go to Bethel. Let's see, what else do I do?
He's the expert on the panel, so.
What else do I do? That's good. I'm an elder here at Hope Community Church. And I've also been here since the beginning.
I'm Bart Carey. We've been married for 24 years. We started coming when Hope started as well. And I'm an engineer at a small medical startup company. And I'm an elder at Hope as well.
I'm Laura Lee, same, been here at Hope since the beginning. We have 2 boys and a foreign exchange student at our house, and they are in 3 separate schools. A couple of them need to be driven, so I'm not a stay-at-home mom, I'm an in-demand mom. I do a lot. And then I work very part-time at the U of M as a nurse.
I'm Dharma. I've been going to Hope just a year after it started, so 17 years or so. I am a toddler teacher during the week and Hope's wedding coordinator here on the weekend, so perhaps I will assist you in your wedding.
Awesome.
There we go.
Fantastic, thanks. We have an expert on the panel. Stan is an expert, so first question is actually going to be on just dating in general. So the Bible really doesn't talk about dating and courtship in particular, right? And so I would love to hear this panel's thoughts on how does a scriptural model of dating or courtship look like? And how would you describe that? And maybe I'll start that. I'm just pointing the finger at David to start off a little bit, but if you want to give it a go, happy for anyone to feel this now, married or single.
Well, the Bible doesn't talk about dating, right? If you guys all watched the Keller clip, he talked about that, and I think the question and answer. Probably just going to regurgitate what he said. He's Pope Keller. He talked about if you have a vision of the biblical concept of marriage, pursue dating in light of that. So if it's to be about for helping each other grow in Christ-like character, if it's to be a covenant, then pursue someone in the sense that you aren't necessarily just looking for a fling, or you aren't just looking for a temporary, like, what's based on your passion or something like that, but develop a friendship with them, develop someone that you want to be living life with, to knowing that you're going to be butting heads at times. And yeah, I don't know, so I'd approach and just have fun. That's it. I like to have fun when I go on dates.
Awesome, David. Thanks. And others on the panel, and even some of the marrieds, they may have some advice or input on those who mentored or coached. Or
You guys didn't have arranged marriages, right?
I would just add to that, that yes, I agree with all the seriousness of like dating someone that's a believer, all that kind of stuff, but not like feeling like you can't go on a first date until you practically know if you're gonna marry them or something. You know, some people like are still like that's what we think dates are about, is finding out and just getting to know somebody. And so
Kind of one of the principles that I've told guys that I've mentored is make sure that as you date this person that you think, and I think you kind of mentioned it, it's that you want that at the end of the evening or at the end of your dating time of them, for them to be a step closer to Jesus, a step closer in their spiritual life. Think of it from that perspective. How can I bless this person? How can I love this person? How can I help this person develop and grow? Also think, if you were invited to their wedding, to be able to look at their future spouse in the eye and congratulate them on the person that they're marrying, and that you would be able to say, you know, I'm hoping that the time that I dated the person that you're marrying was a blessing to them. If you can put that in the context, I think as you date, and I think that changes a little bit how you treat that other person.
awesome.
Because then it's not about you, right?
It's not like,
Good job with the warm-up question. That's good. Just gonna get harder from here, though. No. It's a tough subject, right? So when you look at this audience here, even Trike used to say this there's one single person with one single person, just get together, right? So what about the concept, idea of preferences? Are we allowed to have preferences? Should we be very particular on preferences when we date? I mean, we have similar faith backgrounds. Should we just cross-match, kind of breed? No, just kidding. We talk about, when we do medical experience, it's just kind of, that's all you do. But in an emotional human being, it's multifaceted. And so how do we think through the idea of preferences, and when can that be a little bit beyond what a gospel-centered view of dating should be? Thoughts on that? Was that too hard?
What do you mean by preferences? Like they have blue
Like
eyes?
things.
Or they have,
Yeah, so when we get through, I'm trying to get at the idea of you have a guy and a gal, and what is it, do you have to develop a checklist on someone, and how deep do you go for that? And I'm trying to see, is there a point when you go too far? I'll start with that, and does that follow a little bit?
Yeah.
Take that away.
I'll go first, and I'd love to hear Dharma's thought on that, actually. We had a really good, I don't know if anybody went to the relationship panel yesterday at boot camp.
Okay.
That was your week. All right, so that was very good. And one of the things they talked about there, they did hint at this idea of preference, and the first preference you should have is that you're actually attracted to the person. I mean, there has to be that magnetism, and when I say attraction, it doesn't have to just be physical attraction. There can be a lot of values and purpose and kindness, and there has to be that. So that's number one preference for me. Is there an attraction, both emotionally, physically, to this person? I mean, I always tell my kids, well, you gotta picture kissing them. I mean, you gotta picture that at some point, right? So there's this.
You kiss.
No. Only on the cheeks. So that's the first thing that I think about when I think about that. And then yesterday they did a great job talking about preferences. In other words, wow, we're moving along together. And then instead of just saying I want a girlfriend, I want a boyfriend, they say, wow, you think that way too? And so you're not really looking for that relationship, but then all of a sudden you find out that the two of you kind of have a lot of things in common. So you either like the same things and you have these preferences that are in alignment with one another. Those are the types of things that I think draw people together. It's not that you're seeking out the other sex or whatever it is, but you find out along the road of preferences that they like the same things that you do. So I'll pause there and let other people add.
Can you guys hear okay in the back, all the way to the back? We had a microphone that I misplaced. Would it be helpful to have a microphone?
Yes.
I'd love to.
I can
In the
hear.
back row.
Yeah, I can hear.
You can hear okay?
Well, some people say yes.
Speak up.
Great. Oh, some people said yes. So
Yeah, some people say yes. It was stand. Stand and no.
Put them at that.
We can move all the chairs and sit on the floor.
I have a couple of thoughts about the checklist, and I think, I don't know if you guys do checklists, but I think women do checklists, whether they actually write it out or mentally have a checklist. And I think it would be better to have a preference list versus a checklist, because I'll just be honest, you're never gonna find a guy who's gonna hit all those checklists. And if you do, you might have him during dating time where he hits on all those checklists, but I'm not sure that those check marks are gonna stay after you're married. And that's not to cut guys down, it goes both ways. I just think you're setting yourself up to try and find this perfect guy, and guess what, there's no perfect guy. There isn't, and anyone who tells you different is lying. And so, if you find things that you're compatible with, and you do this, don't go down your checklist and go, he's out of the picture because he doesn't meet 9 and 10, right? Well, is 9 and 10 that important? Are there 1 through 6 that are what really are important, and you can live with the other thing? Excuse me, so careful of the checklist.
There isn't a perfect man, but there is a perfect woman, but I married her.
Yeah. He's just trying to score points.
Did he?
How about this? I'm gonna, based on that question, I think I'm gonna ask another. So I come from a traditional background, from a culture that said you aren't a whole person unless you're married on some level. So arranged marriages, immigrated here, and pockets of this culture still say, and I found this pockets of this culture still say, or some groups of people say that don't get married until you're professionally there, or found the perfect person, right? And so what I found, what happens with the minimal coaching I've done, I see guys have issues with pathologies, and the marriage pathologies, kind of figuring out I want to have the perfect person, so I'm going to start looking for this 2 characteristics. And often, I'm going to use the stereotype that falls in, and this is based on some literature, that the men look for the physical attraction much more, and women look for the financial aspect. That's not an exclusion, but that happens. So beauty and money come into play quite a bit. And so if that's the case, how do you respond to that? How do we get a gospel-centered lens and not just those 2 line checklists? I'm just building that question up once again, just a different angle, and not having those pathologies. I think Keller had talked about it a little bit in one of his books as well on that. So thoughts on that?
Just, I think having to find you have to have someone that has some of the same beliefs as far as God, and so having that foundation together, because otherwise what do you build on, even if there's the attraction or the financial security or into that. So, and then the characters that come out of godliness, do they have, do they care about people? Are they able to ask for forgiveness and just do some of those things that are going to be routinely happening in a relationship? I think are huge things that are like pillars to be encouraged. encouraging people towards more than like the financial stability or things like that. So.
Do you feel like modern dating can be kind of self-merchandising? You're aiming for, if you fall into that culture's idolatry thinking, you're thinking, I want to make sure I'm, guys, if it's stereotypical, I want to be financially set, and I'm going to maybe potentially, in a different way, attract women. Physical beauty, aiming for that, and that becomes the first thing. And so I'd love to just help this group of leaders development that they have how does the gospel respond to that cultural potential idolatry on that. So I love it. Thanks for bringing that up. Any other thoughts on that?
There were a couple things that I looked at in Carol as far as my checklist. It was number one, how did she treat other people, regardless if they could do something for her or not. So I really appreciated that she was kind to people who really couldn't pay back that favor in any way. That was huge for me to be able to see that kindness, because I believe that she would bring that into the marriage. And the other thing I was looking for that she had was just her view on marriage itself. We went into this marriage believing that divorce was not an option, and I was looking for somebody who had that same type of thought, is that we know it's going to be rough, there's going to be patches. We are not allowed to put the carrot of divorce at all in front of us. And so we talked about that when we were even single, about this idea of what marriage should be like. And that was very important for me anyways.
You know, a gal can marry a guy for the wealth, you know, financial security. He can lose his job and you can lose your financial security. And there's a lot of women who are in marriages that are financially secure and are very unhappy. And you can marry a beautiful woman and guess what? Beauty fades. But marriages are supposed to last. So if that's what you're basing your number one priority and standard on, those things are fleeting and can be gone and aren't going to keep a marriage together. So.
And I think you guys would say that, but it's still probably a very small deciding factor. Like, you want to be attracted to your spouse physically, and you want them to be attracted to you physically, you know. But you're right, it's fleeting. I mean, you don't make that the deciding factor at all.
Right.
Otherwise, that's just foolish. Because, yeah, it's gonna fade. And personalities fade too. I mean, you go to a retirement home or assisted living home, and I'm like, their personalities are very much like faded and reserved compared to what they were when they were in their 20s, and so even if you're attracted to their personality and make that the top, like, that's gonna fade too. And
David has a huge heart. He goes to.
You go to assisted living homes all.
Well, thanks. We're with about 10 minutes. I don't know, 10 minutes remaining in all of dating, right? So, with that time remaining, I'm just going to ask 2 more questions. Then we're going to give a little bit of time for the small group cohorts to really reflect on the question. This is a tough job being a panel up here. I mean, even if they have some seasoned experience, it's tough. It's sharing their lives this way. So just what stays here stays here. Keep it confidential at some level, and then we're here to answer questions during breaks as well. Right. The next question kind of deals with the idea of rejection, and so dating involves there's not 100% on dating, right? So 100% of dating folks get into marriage. That doesn't usually happen. That's like a pseudo arranged marriage. So how do we deal with or help others deal with rejection that comes alongside with dating? How does that framework? How do you frame someone's mindset around that? So people's thoughts on that. If you observe loved ones that went through that.
I think, like as a woman, and kind of going back to that, how you're identifying with like beauty or not. If you are rejected, I think women are quick to be like, well, I'm not pretty enough, or I'm not this enough, or I'm not that enough. So I think checking yourself and looking at the situation and not putting that as a personal judgment on yourself if that particular relationship didn't work out. And then seeking counsel from friends about the situation, given fresh eyes and real truths. I think women are really quick to get down on themselves about why, okay, it was probably my fault, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not this enough, because we're emotional people. Probably, I mean, men are emotional too, but we're different in that way. So I think just to not be quick to judge yourself when you're rejected, and just look at the whole picture, and then seek counsel from those who know you well, you're able to laugh and speak truth to yourself when you feel bad about a situation. So,
Appreciate you, Dharma. Other thoughts?
I mean, the whole system of dating just sucks in the sense that
Tell me more, yeah.
until it works out, it's not going to work out. You know, so it's just like, oh, you're going to go on dates, and until you marry someone, they're all going to end. So. What'd you say? Sure, even marriage is ultimately end. You go to that assisted living home. We'll all be there to visit. It's a single ministry. It's a covenant. I don't know. I think it's okay to be. I think so much of you get this pressure in Christianity to be like happy and joyful all the time, and I think it's good to remember that no, it sucks when you break up with someone, and that's okay, and it's okay to like be and just sit there with your friend who's gone through that and comfort them in that way. You don't have to like put on that happy face and say, oh no, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me, and God's working it for my good. So praise God that they just rejected me. Oh, I don't know. It sucks. Life that stinks when that happens.
But there's many more. Finish that one out. There's many more.
Fish in the sea. That's right. Fishing, I guess, helps people.
I told David to remain single at least until tonight.
They made me, yeah. Covenant myself to single. 9 p.m. though.
How many people in the class have taken soul care? All right, I would love to ask you the question, what did soul care teach you about how to support someone who's in pain? With the teacher right here.
What's soul care?
What's soul care?
It's like connecting 101, just kind of how you walk alongside people and help them enter into people's.
Care for their soul.
It's a training.
Yeah, just a class.
Don't minimize what they're feeling. Is one thing we talked about. Like handling their heart well.
I think too, a huge part of it is recognizing what you think they need and trying to figure out what they actually need, because people deal with things in a different way, and how you want to be comforted is not necessarily how they want to be comforted. So trying to seek that out and seek out ultimately their good rather than what you think is best.
Good. Now, the first cycle we're wrapping up right about now. What we're going to do now is I'm going to put up a question here on dating. We're going to cover dating again in the singleness aspect as well. I'd love to have your cohorts delve on it a little bit and ask questions in the back channel. You can do it in the off-road today's meet deal. And we'll chat a little bit with our folks here as well. So let me put up one slide here, at least about a couple of takeaways that when I was chatting with these folks as well. Some dating takeaways, a couple of the guys I'm working with, and minimal experience on some of these as compared to you guys who've been working for decades on this. So, yeah, it is decades. Yeah. So, I wonder if people are going into dating, I ask them first, do you have a sound understanding of the gospel? And if you don't have that framework, and one of the ways I say it as a takeaway is I'm selfish at a default. And so, and so if I have a hard time, do I see other people as having souls and really having that giving attitude? If I'm not having, that's kind of a break checklist right there. Are you walking in Christian community, seeking and listening to wise counsel about your relationship? Those that are dating, are you even doing that? And what are those people telling you? And do you have a good understanding of what you're dating towards and for? Especially in this age demographic, 26 plus, I would say, definitely having that idea and having intentionality about it is important. So this is the question I want to do as a takeaway in your cohorts. We have about 10 minutes, so keep it succinct, and you can ask for your takeaways. What difference does the gospel of Jesus Christ make to those who follow him in every area of his life, including dating? And what steps can singles and non-singles take regarding dating in our church community? All right, so a little break time here. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. So we're going to cover singleness, and then I'm going to go into some background on singleness. So first of all, the Old Testament view of singleness. So some of you have covered this already on your intro in your prep questions. So just as a background to get refreshed, all right? So when we look at the Old Testament, it was, and cultures in general, traditional cultures thought of it as, ancient cultures thought of marriage as the primary ways to get procreation done. And the corollary was that singleness was a curse if you remain single for the rest of your life. And so it was highly undesirable. The barrenness was a curse. So then you saw people like eunuchs, physically not able to have children. And then you also have widows and lepers, all the outcasts, right? I'm going to summarize all the Old Testament view of singleness in about 2 slides here. So we're going to go to a section in Isaiah. All right? A beautiful chapter. I'm doing a lot of reading in Isaiah and prep for your guys' reading in Isaiah all of winter. So when we're reading chapter 53, there's a prophecy about Jesus. It's pointing forward to Christ. And there's a verse that says, when his soul makes an offering for guilt, he shall see his offspring. He shall prolong his days. The will of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. It's pretty impressive. There's a word offspring put in there. Right? And if it is talking about Jesus, what kind of offspring did Jesus have? Was it physical offspring? Yeah, people are shaking their head, right? So here's the first mention that's a complete reversal of the Old Testament view of singleness and curse. It says there are a concept of spiritual regeneration that's causing an offspring. Okay? And so it's not physical offspring, but a spiritual heritage. Wow, that's pretty impressive. And so in chapter 54 in Isaiah, another verse, sing, O barren one, who did not bear. Barrenness, a curse. No, it's a sing. Break forth into singing, cry out loud. And it goes on and on. Barrenness is not a curse. That's pretty impressive. That's all the Old Testament in one slide, but I'm going to go to the New Testament. Well, I'm going to read one more verse in 56, verses 3 through 5. It says, to the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths, who choose the things that please me and hold fast my covenant, I will give in my house and within my walls a monument and a name better than sons and daughters. That's impressive, right? I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off, elevating their status as well. And Jesus does this a ton in the New Testament as well, not meaning to skip Jesus, but we're going to get to an account in Acts. Acts chapter 8, there's an account of an Ethiopian eunuch. And do you know what chapter he's been reading? Isaiah in this section. Pretty impressive, huh? So he's reading this and he gets converted. I want to be baptized. The gospel can move into people's lives in that kind of dramatic way. So a couple verses highlighting these things. So Luke and Matthew and 1 Corinthians, they talk about the concept and elevates this idea of singleness. And it's unheard of. It's a role reversal, complete change in kind of values. And Jesus did that. We were hearing in that Luke sermon series. So that's that's our backdrop, okay? And these guys are going to answer all the hard questions, okay? So this is a tough subject, so we're going to go through it for about 20 to 25 minutes, and we'll take another break, okay? We're looking at your back channel conversation through todaysmeet.com/offroad. So they're going to be answering some of the questions, but not all of them, okay? All right. This is really loud.
You're in front of the speaker.
It's a boot camp getting back to me. All right. Here we go. All right. So here we go. So in our at Hope, there's a ton of singles. It's obvious, right? So you have a congregation that's teeming with singles. How do you? But also there's a ton of marrieds. And on a weekly or monthly basis, there are these announcements come up on Hope that says, married, this person got married last week, this person had a child last week. But it doesn't say, congratulations on being single another week. It doesn't say that, right? And so how Do you feel valued as a single? Now this is going to go first to Dharma and David, then to the rest of you if you'd like to do that. It's a tough question, but what's your thoughts on that?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know if there's something you can do like in front of the church, like you said, like celebrate that in that way. But I think those who are married that are your friends. A lot of my friends got married really young in college, or like right out of college. So I have a lot of married friends, and they have done a good job of maintaining those friendships. So I think as married people who are celebrating with people with babies who are celebrated, to not forget your single friends, and to maintain those relationships in that way. I don't know how you can necessarily do it up in like the front of the church in a sense, but to know that you, those single people still need to feel loved and not forgotten once you're kind of moving towards marriage and kids. So I don't know.
Thanks, Dharma. David, do you want to do a few thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, do I need the mic, or am I good?
Maybe I'll use the mic if you don't want to use it.
Oh, I didn't mean that.
No.
Okay. I would say, man, the gospel, I think, allows you to rejoice with those people without, because if you believe the gospel and realize that you are son or daughter of God, and your identity is secure in that, and you're significant in that, then you aren't threatened by seeing the repeated married people and babies that are being born, because your hope isn't in that. You know, your hope isn't in being married or having kids. The hope is in Christ, and knowing that your sins have been forgiven, and Christ has come, and He loves you, and God loves you, and so that allows you to then rejoice with those people, because for God, in His good wisdom, has seen fit to bless them in that way, with marriage and with kids, and He's seen to bless me right now to remain single, and so it's like a win-win-win all around with the gospel. So I'd reply that way.
Until 9 p.m., right?
Until 9 p.m. Yeah.
No, thanks. Other thoughts from you folks been married? Any thoughts?
You guys were single once, right? You don't remember?
So here's something that Steve used to say a long time ago when the church first started. He would say, marriage doesn't remove your problems, it just switches them all around. Rearranges, there's the word. It just rearranges them. So as a single person, one of the things that we were really trying to speak of is you're going to have challenges whether you're married or whether you're single. The issues are just going to be different, right? So just having that perspective as a single person, that while yes, I do have longings to be married, or I have other longings, you know, I always tell my kids that you marry the wrong person, you're going to wish you were single again. So super important to remember that we're all sinners regardless if you're married or not, and to keep that in perspective. It will not solve the loneliness of your heart. It's one of the things we talk about in our family anyways.
I think too, there's a temptation, and I think Satan uses it pretty strongly. Satan really wants you to sit on the sideline, right? So I think there's a temptation to think, well, my life really doesn't start until I graduate from college. My life really doesn't start until I find a spouse. My life really doesn't start until I have a family, and that's all a lie. Satan wants to keep you out of ministry, out of engaging in the world, out of engaging in life. So the fact that you're here at LDI Off-Road shows that you're probably not buying into that lie. But tell the people around you that can be a lie, and Satan will keep you on the sidelines as long as he can. So I think to say, no, I'm going to get involved in ministry. I'm going to, you're not disqualified because you're single. Please, Satan's going to tell you that all the time.
Otherwise, that sucks for Jesus.
Love it. Next question, I'm going to grab that. People wanted that. Next question is going to come to you, Dharma. All right, so Dharma, you are the wedding coordinator. She helped coordinate my wedding 8 years ago. So,
We wondered how long.
8 years, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks. hanging on. So I'm just wondering, it's a unique role, and you're single, and so how do you process that? And that, in the summers, I'm sure it's week after week that you have that, and I'll just hear your thoughts on how do you process that role as a wedding coordinator, yet still being single.
Right. Yeah. Can you hear me if I just talk? Yes, so I've been the coordinator for almost, I think, 9 or 10 years, and I've been single that whole time. And like you said, yep, like this summer I had 8 weeks in a row of weddings, and then a week off, and then like 4 more. So it's a lot of love, which I love, and I celebrate it, and it's very exciting. But I do, at the end of each season, kind of go through like a little sad time, kind of a woe is me kind of a time, and just have to check myself. My small group ladies are really great about talking through that, and just like, hey, can you pray for me? It's coming. Like, I feel good now, but I know it's coming. And it does every time. Yeah, I think just being open with the people that know me, care about me, to like check in with me, like, how are you doing, and just prayer, and spending time reading those scripture verses that speak to me about my self-worth. Really helpful. And then just kind of knowing that, yeah, I think those key verses are really helpful, and mostly the people checking on me, but it is a weird thing, area that I'm in with that, but it's good, and I love seeing marriage start and stuff, but it's, yeah, so.
Thanks, Dharma and David. I appreciate you, especially in this role and the life you're in. Kind of describe maybe some of the emotions people are going into, but you have a very unique role and that powerful emotion that can come in. Thanks for being honest and sharing that. So I'm going to just a couple. This is phrases. I'm sure that single folks in this room have heard unhelpful phrases, unhelpful advice. I'd love to hear the top 10 unhelpful advices that you've received, or phrases that you've received as single people. And maybe I'm going to feel this at David a little bit. I don't know. I'm sure maybe you got perfect advice, right? And so, I know I put them on the spot a little bit, but if you any unhelpful phrases that I should not tell you as a friend, and I'd love to hear what I should not tell you.
Sure. I'll take the mic. Thanks. Be abound when you're a single person. It's a lot of it revolves around false hope. People just say, "Don't worry, God's definitely got someone out there for you." It's like, oh, did He tell you that? That'd be great if He did. Otherwise, I don't know if He does. Otherwise, they're them saying like, "Don't worry, like the person that you're dating or that you just broke up with, like all their good qualities are just going to be even better in the next person that you meet." It's like maybe not. Maybe it's like they're a lot worse than that. I don't know. Just all the false hope. I think that comes. I'm trying to think of what else.
What would be helpful? Like if you broke up with someone from your married friends, like what would be helpful? What are some things? We know things that aren't, but.
Yeah. My friends have helped me by just. Have you guys heard of like just the ministry of presence? Just like being there with, that's really comforting to me. So they'll, I don't know, buy me a drink, they'll buy me food, or take me out and hang out with me. Just listen to me and kind of process through it with me. They'll pray for me, and I find that helpful. And they'll kind of descend into where I'm at emotionally, and kind of meet me there, which is what I think is Christ-like, because that's what He did to us. He descended and met us where we were. So I think that's really helpful. Anyone else?
Thanks.
My favorite from college is, if you look to the Lord above, you'll stumble over the one you love.
Dharma, was that helpful?
That was on the unhelpful side.
So you're gonna have a bunch of people walking like that.
That's another
Another unhelpful one would be just stop looking. Another unhelpful one is just stop looking as a single person. Like, oh, you just have to stop looking and then you'll find it. That advice applies nowhere else in life. Like, oh, you lost your wedding ring? Oh, just stop looking for it. You'll find it. You lost your child? Just stop. You'll find it. This is dumb. I mean, I understand that when they're talking about contentment and that idea, like, be content in the Lord, but no, it's okay to look. Good, maybe you'll find something.
And you'll start at 9.
And I'll start at 9. I'll be at the door.
That's good. I'll go a little outlook. I'll ask you a question then as I piggyback off that one. So, this idea of pursuit. You mentioned going after something, right? That idea of pursuit. Men and women, likewise. So, what does the idea of pursuit look like, and what is balancing that being with a contentness that you can have as being single? How do you balance those two extremes of kind of modalities? So, maybe you want to field that one first? I'd love to hear the married folks as well on this one.
I think something someone mentioned earlier was having it not be about yourself. I think that's about pursuit, is that ultimately they're your neighbor, you're loving them, and that means that you want their best interest in mind. And so going into it realizing if that's not you, praise God. And if that's someone else, great. And so pursuing someone, realizing that if they realize like, no, I'm just not feeling it, I'm not attracted to you, I don't want to date you, that's okay. Because ultimately it's not about you, it's about them. And you wanting to like serve them in that way. I think a pursuit in that way, it becomes less stalkerish and and things like that. I forget the other question that you had.
And contentment.
And contentment.
How do you balance that?
Yeah.
How do you keep that tension? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it expresses itself in different ways in different people. I know for me, it's being reminded by friends of the gospel. It's sometimes just spending time with the Lord and just realizing, just being thankful for what He's given me and just seeking Jesus's help just to be content, because I can't be content on my own at all. He needs to provide that for me, and He does. When you seek Him, He does.
Thanks, David. You do.
I have something to say. I think when you're single and finding a mate, having a girlfriend or a boyfriend becomes the idol, idolatry, that's when it's an issue. And you get married, and then having children becomes your idol. Or pleasing your spouse becomes your idol. Or having the nicest house on the street, or the biggest, or the best job becomes your idol. So looking, I don't think is a problem. It's when it becomes an idol that you have to have that, and it's more important than your relationship with Jesus and your other friends, and that's where the imbalance comes in.
I said one small little comment. One small comment, which is when I talk to guys, whether it be about dating or, in this case, jobs or a career, I always tell them that striving and being content are not opposite of each other. It's very doable to strive, and be content where you're at. I just think those things can, in duality, they can be there together. So.
How?
Go ahead.
Is it a how?
How do they be there? Well, I think it's a lot of doing what David had said already. Just if you're in the Word, as Paul said, I've learned to be content in all situations, right? That's what he was really talking about in Philippians 4. When he said, I can do all things through Christ, he was talking about how can I be content in all situations. That's true, but Paul was definitely a striver. I mean, he went out and he shared the gospel, and he was all about making that the mission of his life. And at the same time, he recognized where he was at and whatever he was doing, that he was going to be content, whether that be in prison. And that just blows my mind how the Apostle Paul wrote those prison epistles and the perspective that he had. Right? How Paul wrote some of those things. and he completely changed his view, or other people's view, on what contentment looked like. So thinking about Paul in prison is one of the ways that we can really focus on contentment.
I was going to say, there's a verse in James. There's a verse in James where James talks about you who go and say, we're going to go to this town and make such and such a profit. He says, your life is a vapor. You don't even, you appear for a while and you go away. He said, you should say, if the Lord wills, you will go to such and such a town. And it's interesting that he doesn't remove like the planning or the desire, but he looks to the heart and says, what are you trusting in? If your trust is in your plan, thinking that you know what's going to happen, he says that's wrong. So I see that with contentment too, of saying, like I'm going to pursue this girl, but if the Lord wills and it works out, great. If not, great. Your heart's trusting in God ultimately.
Can I say one thing on that? So I remember like Steve did a sermon on when he was doing the Song of Solomon about the girl grazing her flock by the guy, and kind of like being there, being in the vicinity where he'll notice you. And so I remember having lots of conversations with girls about what does that mean and how do I do that. And the thing I think is like, yes, it's good to be out there and be noticed, but then how do you guard your heart that all your hope isn't in, well, they have to notice me. And so that's that hard part again of how do you go do those things, or guys, you go pursue this girl, but then you have to, that can't be everything you think about the rest of the day, and you can't be consumed with it. So how do you stay consumed with God, but go do those things and keep giving that over to him, because it's going to constantly be, well, I want that, but how do we let him control the outcome, but yet we.
We like this question.
I'm obviously not single, but I think at the root of it, there has to be a question of, does anyone love me? Right? I think ultimately it comes down to, if you trust in God and you believe, God, do you love me? You say you love me, you want my best, but do you really? I think it comes down to, do I trust that God loves me and wants my best? So I think that's where the gospel meets it. Because if you believe that God loves you and wants your best, and I think we beat ourselves up sometimes by saying, and it's not just in singleness, but in other areas, somehow I got myself here and God's surprised that I'm here. God's going, well, how did you get there? Well, see, now if you did this, and it's like I talk to my kids. If you did this, and this, and you're there, you shouldn't be surprised you're there. And I'll deal with it. It's a little bit how I talk to my kids. Not real helpful.
Put him on the panel for the children. Parents and children.
No, thanks. That's fantastic. We have about 5 to 7 minutes left, and one comment, and then I'd like to open it up for maybe 1 or 2 questions, and we'll have a break. Okay? You'll have an extended time for questions towards the end, not too extended, 15 to 20 minutes. So we all begin our life being single, right? Agreed? And then there's a point most of us may find someone to journey life with and get married, but there's a percentage that may not. But there's even that percentage that is being single, that is being married. They are going to be working with a ton of singles, especially in their home. Their kids, right? And towards the end of life, most people end life as being single. And then, all of eternity, you're single. Interesting. So the vast majority of your entire life is in singleness. And is there a celebration of singleness? Is there something about that in a theological thought? So one other ending question on this first on singleness is the idea of gift of singleness. All right, there's this words that's being used wrong, that there's a gift of singleness. How is singleness a gift? I think some people just think, I don't think that's a gift for me. I want that gift. That's not a good gift. That's a bad gift. You think of getting gifts, that's not the gift you want. I am thankful I got this great gift of singleness. Most people just say, no, get this gift away from me. How do we process that idea of a gift in the context of this whole thing? How do we move towards a celebration of singleness and a contentment? It's just another angle on the same question. So. Anyone want to take that as a start? I just had this as an opening. I'm happy to eventually try to address it, but you're all the experts, so.
Never said.
Well, I think having going into any challenge with a heart of thankfulness is healthy. So in my singleness, I think it is, not easy, but it's helpful and healthy to celebrate that. There's a lot of things I can do. I have a sister with 3 children. I call her on the phone, and there's 4 kids, they're screaming in the background, Mom, 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 I need this, I'll call you back later. We can talk later when the kids are sleeping. I can just go where I want to go. I can do what I want to do. I have a lot of freedom to make choices for myself, which is awesome, really. So I think that is a gift. It's a really good thing. And to just be thankful for where I am and all the things that I do have, things I've been given, makes it feel fun and joyful. It's a joy. It's a way to seek joy in that, rather than just being like, I'm just alone, It's better. So yeah, I think thinking about what you have and what you can be thankful for is really helpful.
Okay, can I comment on that real quick? I can speak from experience. Dharma blesses us, blesses our family many times with their singleness. So that's something that you have the ability to do. And I think if Satan says you should be on the sidelines, you can't do that type of ministry. That's the lie. So, thanks, Dar.
No, I was just gonna say that same thing. I don't have a family, and she doesn't bless my family because I don't have one, but.
Outside of all what they said.
Despite everything. Despite that, it was exactly the same. No, you have the ability, you have so much more time to serve and bless other people. Because you don't have the responsibility of kids, or even like checking in with someone and saying, hey, is it okay if I go do this? And that's such a joy if you can embrace that and see that as a time to do that. Oh my gosh, it's so much fun to bless people and serve people that way.
No, thanks. And the question came out of a question that a guy I was coaching a couple of years ago asked me, and I struggled answering that. And I felt like I was at loss to answer that. And I went back to scripture, and a couple wise counsel, someone sitting on this panel, gave me was, the idea of a gift is meant to build someone else up. And so it doesn't mean it's stress-free. And so if you have a gift of singleness, you can build another person, walk alongside, do other things, and build people up. And so it doesn't mean it's stress-free living, right? And I love that. I love that concept, and that helped out. So 2 questions from the audience. I'll check the back channel conversation, but anyone have a question? Maybe say your name and a little bit about yourself. And single or married or dating?
My name's Sam Camp, and I'm married. So I guess this question's pondered my heart for a very long time. And so Genesis starts with God creating the world, calling it good, and establishes man and woman, and establishes marriage as something that seems to have an indefinite duration. And so then you go through the fall, etc., where marriage is still something, but it ends as of death. And then it talks about in new creation how there will be no marriage. And so why do you guys think that creation starts with an indefinite marriage between man and woman, but eternity has no marriage between man and woman, and only with Christ? What's changed between Genesis and Revelation that means that we no longer need an eternal mate, but only have a need for a mate with Christ?
Sam, right?
Yeah.
Sam, such an easy question. I'll actually have Bart or so. Anyone want to take that one?
Stan and I just mumbled to each other, so conferred. I think there is clearly the marriage that's set up in Genesis is a foreshadowing of God's marriage to the church. So I guess the way I think of it, throughout Scripture, throughout this side of glory, everything, I think that's true. Absolutely everything is a way of God communicating truth to us that He wants us to understand. So if you think of it this way, in creation from God's perspective, what he set up as a construct was his, he had a blank sheet of paper, right? But he set up husband and wife, different, right, in unity. He set up parents and children. And all of the, you go through that, and all of that is, I love you like a father. I love you like a husband loves his wife. So I think in glory, we will then, he will constantly unfold that in front of us. So I think the picture of marriage is not necessary anymore. But it's a great question, and keep asking that question, keep wrestling through it, and when you ask Jesus, just tap me on the shoulder because I want to come over and hear his answer.
But we are actually married in heaven, right? It's the real marriage that we're all longing for. So Christ and, right? Yeah. Sorry, not you.
I think that would be minus 1 point.
One other question from the audience before we take a break. Any other questions on the topic of singleness that you may have? Two. That hand went up first. There we go. 5 milliseconds.
Okay.
Just say your name, please.
My name is Kurt. I am wondering, how do you know if you're like called like lifelong singleness?
If you come to the end of your life and you're single. that's a definite no. Oh, you must be in track too.
Rob trained him, so he knows the answer.
Pretty true.
No, it is though, right?
So,
Benji was willing to take it. Yes, really?
no, at some level, when I have kids, how do they know they're going to get married at that age, right? At certain lives, at thresholds of growth and development, you just won't even know. And so, at some level, as you journey through life, you will start knowing certain things. You don't know. I don't know if my marriage is going to end with a covenant breaking with someone's life going. We don't know those things. But you're asking underneath process question that is going to be hard to answer. I don't have the tapestry of life figured out, right? And God knows that we're weaving that thread through. So I wonder if I have an inkling what's going to happen 20 years from now, I have not an idea. But sometimes we go through, when I coach some of the guys, they have through waves of cycles where they have huge pursuit, interest, but other times seasons of deep contentment because of what they're involved in. And so there may be times where you're having that desire that comes in, working through that, processing through that, that's reasonable. But then there'll be periods where you are also maybe single and content. I think there's a child, and I look at my kids and say, they have no idea what's next 10 years holds, and that's the response I have.
I was going to say, I know from my own experience, so this is just speaking for me, that sometimes when I focus on that so much, just trying to figure it out, it prevents me from entering the of ministry. And so I'd encourage you to be wary of that. Not saying that you're doing that, but yeah, because if you're just saying like I can't go fully in life until I know if I have to get through singleness or not, like, nah, that'd be something the devil would want you just to ponder until you're dead. And so you just got to go forward and just, if you want to pursue a girl, cool, pursue a girl. If you want to like just pursue work or what God has called you to, cool, pursue that. And then God brings it into your life. Praise God. Praise God.
Fantastic questions. I'm going to put a closing slide here before we go into your time together in your cohorts. Some singleness takeaways, okay? This is just mine. It could be completely not landing with any of you, but if it lands with one of you, great. Resist the myth of romantic completeness. I put that in. It's a mantra I kind of put in. I don't think anyone will kind of have complete you. At some level, having that, who's going to complete me? I need to find that. So I think resist that myth, because there's really only one relationship that can do that, and the gospel in Jesus Christ is that's my identity. And so gospel shows that singleness should be celebrated. I love that. I love that. How can you celebrate singleness? I think that's the way to do it. And singleness does not equate loneliness. It does not. You can have loneliness while you're married. You can have loneliness in different areas of your life. It's just, yeah. And we are made for relationships with other people, meant to be in community, so that is huge. So surround yourself with gospel friendships. The question, again, just similar to the last one, right? What difference does the gospel of Jesus make to those who follow him in every area of their life, including singleness? What steps can singles and non-singles take regarding the subject? If it's a singles working with marrieds, marrieds working with singles. Especially in the cohorts, there's some mixes. So dialogue, you have about 10 minutes. Next topic is on marriage. So what we're going to cover is a pretty lengthy subject. Marriage, we're not going to cover parenting or kids. I know they are important. I have them. And, but we're not going to cover that. So, David is back. Good. I was wondering where you were and if you had got off your train. Yeah.
I just want to ask the guys real quick before we see this video, and except for the ones that we talked about. I just want to ask the question: what is she crying about? If you watch the video, I just want to ask the question: what's she crying about?
Right after the video.
Right after the video.
All right.
Think about that.
You want to do the honors?
Hey Tyler, you on your way to algebra?
Yeah, I'll see you there.
You're awful!
The preceding joke was brought to you by Men. Men! We don't know what we did.
All right, man, for those of you that's the first time you saw that, what was she crying about?
Yeah.
What did they say?
Right, bad at algebra is an option.
Just so you know, just so everyone knows, I had no idea.
I had no idea.
Until
I watched it multiple times too.
Hold on.
Wait, there's an
Women
answer.
in the room. Women in the room. We'll get to the men for a second. How many women in the room know exactly why she did it? Okay. Guys.
How many of you are still going, I have no idea what I did? It was my daughter who saw it for the very first time. She said,
Your question was,
yeah, what did she really want? What did she really want?
To walk with him.
Yes.
why did she ask?
Yes! Why did she ask?
She was making herself available.
So awesome series. There's a ton of those. So just they played it at boot camp yesterday, and it was fantastic. So thanks for playing along.
Every guy yesterday.
We can do a film of theology on that. Just sit there and film theology for the next 2 hours. Okay, so the next part is on marriage. Yeah. So all right, we have a whole 30 minutes to complete all the marriage questions. All right. So I have a scripture to start with. 1 Corinthians 7:27-28. Are you unmarried? Do you not look for a wife? Do not look for a wife. But if you do marry, you have not sinned. And if a virgin marries, she has not sinned. But those who marry will face many troubles in this life. And I want to spare you this. What I mean is that time is short. This is St. Paul, Apostle Paul writing this, and this passage is completely confusing on the surface. I don't have to say on the surface, but it seems to be completely different from the same guy who wrote Ephesians 5, which is about the bedrock of marriage. And so, was Paul just having a really horrible day? What's going on? Like that day when he wrote this chapter? Anyone want to take this one?
Go ahead, Stan.
Was he having a horrible day? Maybe he was. So
How do we process this tension?
Carol wants the answer.
No, I think this ties into with the contentment we were talking about. As we're talking about contentment for singles, I'm thinking as people get married, they still need to be content in those situations because marriage isn't just this. You know, you have to work at it, you have to put effort into it, and you get sidetracked by the things you have to work out in your marriage and do and where. But then on the other side, when you are married, there's this great example of Christ that we have to shoot for and to strive for, and it can be a beautiful thing. but it's also the thing then that God's using to refine us the most, where when we're single, God's using our singleness to refine us. And so both are refining processes, and that's my initial.
I was just going to say, actually, the verse is what it really is. Paul is saying it is better to be single. I mean, he really is saying that. And that is the better way of life, because life is short. There's so many things to do for the gospel. And when you get married, then you have sort of a dual kind of purpose, in a sense, where the singleness could still be single of purpose in that sense. I think that's really what he's going to do. So the question then becomes, how do you become singleness of purpose when you're married? I think that's kind of where
No, you asked a good question, but what's your answer to that? How do you create singleness of purpose?
Well,
how do you get two sinful people to converge on one?
Ghost Dan.
Yeah, ghost man. So how do you get, I'm just going to repeat what a lot of my wife tells me every single night, those types of things. This is really where this is coming from. So how do you get singleness of purpose in marriage? Piece of that is, number one, recognizing that we still have the purpose of being ministers of the gospel. And you find ways to do that together as a couple. We determined a long time ago that we were going to sign up for things that we would do these better together than we would if we were apart. So part of that is finding out what's our ministry now as one, because the Bible does call us one now, right? So unpacking what that means is a whole nother conversation, but finding out that purpose as one married couple is going to be that discussion that you then continue to have and you hone in on. And one of the things that we did is we helped start a church as a married couple. And we did that together, and we felt that we could do this better together individually, as a couple, than we could individually. One of the first things we did is we signed up to be youth workers over at Bethlehem. So we worked in the junior high and the high school. But we did this together again because we felt that these were things that we wanted to do as a couple. Right, we talked a lot about that, right?
Yeah.
Just checking
but
with
I'm
my,
just saying other people could have
mentor.
the same vision. Could have the same vision for something, but you'd still be doing other ministries separate.
I just want to add, let's look at historical context. So the verse before this says, at this present time, I think you should remain as you are. In Corinth at the time, a lot of theologians think that there was just unrest or persecution going on. So he's talking about you shouldn't add on to problems. Like if you're married, there's more worries, there's more problems. So at this present time, so he's like, what I mean is, the time is short, could pass at that time. So it's very true with the how you take it too. But I've heard that's another argument or another perspective.
Yeah, the whole 1 Corinthians chapter 7 is a whole dialogue on marriage. It just doesn't start here. If you go back to if you go back to verse 7 verses 5, right? 7:5. What's Paul telling us to do? Anybody remember 7:5? He's telling us to fight Satan, right? By coming together as a couple. And so there is a whole bunch of things going on in there prior to this verse, what Paul's talking about. Separate yourself for a time being.
You're talking about sex.
Yes, I'm talking about sex.
It was the class subject today.
So one of the things we say, I'll ask Carol if she wants to go battle Satan.
On that note, I'm going another way. Yes, I did take things out of context. Completely put a verse on the page, and it was a. That's not the way to start, right? I'd love to start with another question here. I'd love to hear, at least from married couples, how they decided upon their spouse. And I'd love to hear both of you. I'd love to just hear if that's you, Laura Lee. Is that all right?
I dated a little bit when I was a freshman in college, a non-Christian, and that did not, he actually treated me really well, but I realized that our vision for life and where we're heading wasn't the same. And then I dated a Christian guy and thought, oh, this is gonna be so different, it's gonna be so good, and he treated me like crap. And I decided, I'm not gonna date anymore. Not necessarily choosing singleness, but just not really looking for it. And then met Bart right before I graduated, like 3 months before I graduated. And I had a job lined up in North Carolina, ready to go, wasn't interested in finding anyone back home. So there was, I don't even know, there was a little bit of an immediate attraction. And I think what I found most attractive about him is he's funny. And I kept thinking, he's this funny guy, I want to get to know him better. And then things moved pretty quickly because I was graduating, and if we were going to do this, we were going to decide if we were going to do a long distance relationship. Neither one of us wanted to do that, so it happened pretty quickly, and the feelings went pretty quickly. But I wouldn't say the first time I actually met him, I was like, oh my gosh, you know, I want to get to know him better. It really wasn't that. It was in a setting where we were in a big group, and I sat next to him and joked around, and I liked his personality. So.
Bart, before you ask, I'm going to add another layer to that as well. So answer that question with Laura Lee in terms of how you decided on Laura Lee, but also what advice would you give to the engaged, and also how about those that are in a prolonged dating period, and they are maybe just holding on for a while, and how do you move that along? How do you move that process along, and what do you make that next decision and that passivity? So just answer all that, please.
So, I think it's kind of funny that she said I was funny, because you know how you mentioned personalities kind of fade? I say I'm not really funny, I'm just awkward. I just do it really well.
And we laugh at him about that.
So, the other thing that I would add on top of that, so we met August 27th, 1990, and we were married September 7th, 1991. So 1 year after. Yeah. I was 20, so I was pretty young.
I married him young so I could train him the way I wanted him.
I always say, how's that working for you? So, but for me, with Laura Lee, I had people around me that as they met Laura Lee, well, like my dad said, we were looking at, okay, we're serious. We were serious at a point. And he says, well, why don't you guys just get married? It's gonna be, just get married. Come on. What's holding you back? Let's go. That was like in March. We met in August. It was like, yeah, go. But for me, I think the thing that helped me in this was my dad said, can you imagine life without her? And I said, no. He says, well, I think that's your answer. But and I think for the people that are dating for a long time, so again, I knew Laura Lee for just a little over a year before we were married. But those that are dating a long time, I would actually say, what are you afraid of? Right? So if it's based on fear that your extended courtship is there, I think there's a lot that's put into play when we say, you know, did you choose the right person? And I personally think that there is a lot of freedom, and I think when you marry, you have married the right person, because now you're married. You've made a covenant before God, and no matter what two people you bring together, there will be integration issues. There will be things that don't fit well together. So just throw away the idea that it will all be happy and blissful, because it's a lie. There is work to be done in marriage. So I think those who are extending it, it's why.
Santa Kiro?
what I liked about him was I knew that he loved Jesus because he was being upfront about that and the things that he had done and said. And then I thought he was cute, and I thought he was funny, and we had a lot of fun together. And I waited a long time for him to ever ask me out, so I'd given up on that idea. But I did really like those things and those qualities that he had, and the consistency.
I saw two things, and this kind of relates to, I think somebody asked a question on, I was looking for somebody who would not take marriage lightly. So this idea, I know you guys, sounds like you guys are all Keller fans, so I know you must have read his marriage book. He talks about covenantal relationships versus consumer relationships. I really wanted someone, I'll say it this way rather than saying someone who would not divorce. We'll say it this way. I was really looking for somebody who would not make that option 1, 2, or 3. I was really looking for somebody who was really interested in a covenant commitment. And our marriage verse was Psalm, and I always get it wrong now, 26 years ago. So it was Psalm 86, 34, and it says, I will not violate my covenant or alter what my lips have uttered. And I just really meant that on my wedding day. I was looking for a woman who could say that with me as much as possible. So that was a big one for me. And then the other one was that, let's see, there was that one, and then, I actually forgot the other one was. Oh, I already told you, I just loved her kindness. I just really, that made her very attractive. So those were the two things I was looking for. And I knew I was marrying a stranger. I really believe that as well. So even though I'm marrying a stranger, we're going to develop together into people that are completely always changing. So can this person change with me as we move along this journey? So that was really exciting for me.
And on our last premarital meeting, our pastor told us he didn't think we should get married. And so that made us have lots of conversations with my family and just really think this through and pray about it, and just the peace that we had, that was also something that was really nice to go into it, having really dealt with that before and going, nope, I really believe this is who God wants.
If I might ask, why? Why did you say that?
Because we were coming from such different families. He said he wasn't sure if I was going to spend the rest of my life frustrated because his family was very dysfunctional.
Did he still do the wedding?
What's that?
Did he do the wedding?
Yes, eventually he talked with me and my mom and dad and talked to, and they were able to say, oh, we get what you're saying and that grasp, but we've seen him be solid and he wants to pursue God and lead me and do those things. So
I came from a very dysfunctional, we put the dis in function, if you know what I mean, really. So I came from a very dysfunctional family. And Carol came from a very strong, relational, Jesus-loving family, and all the things that go along with both of those. So I would question, if I saw a couple like ourselves, I would question whether they should get married as well, to be honest. And super thankful that he did that. He took marriage so seriously that he challenged us to really look, should you guys be getting married because of the backgrounds that you're coming from.
He said our cultures were so different that he was married to people from 2 different countries before wanting to marry us at that point until he stopped.
This was Pastor John Piper, by the way.
Wait, what?
We changed his
But that was before he was famous, really.
So John Piper was wrong then at one point? I just want to say, I'm really glad you guys got married. And I will also say, if you dig through the Hope archives and find the sermon that Stan talked about, his history, this man's story is totally a but God story. It's amazing. So we don't have time for that tonight, but tears to my eyes whenever I hear, because God's done an amazing thing and blessed a lot of us through your marriage. So, thank you.
One thing that attracted me to Bart too, we both grew up in Christian families, and that was important that I knew he was a Christian, and not just a Christian, like he was going to church. And as a college student, getting up and going to church isn't always high priority. So it was important that he was making his commitment to Christ very visible. But his friends spoke highly of him, his brother spoke highly of him, my friends liked him. And so if you're dating someone and everyone around you doesn't like that person, I would stop and take note of that very, very clearly. If you, I think one of the questions we read was, what do your friendships look like after you're married? And if you don't have your friends anymore because they don't like your spouse and they can't stand to be around them, you're probably gonna struggle having marriage relationships with other couples. So take note of that.
Thank you. You know, behind the scenes, your off-road channel on that today's meet, we've decided we may sprinkle some in, but we're going to put an online platform afterwards on the city and have hopefully welcome you to answer some of those questions there as well, because of the sake of time. You know, this is my marriage counseling as well from all of you here. So this is my marriage at Richmond Seminar live, and I'm going to ask a question here. Carey and I struggle with, and how do you fight fair? That's a loaded question, but how do you work through conflict and if you're a team, how do you fight fair? I'm just gonna start.
So I don't know if, I always like to share this because I think it's interesting. I think it's John Gotham did some research, is that right? So he did some research. He's not a Christian, he's not a professed Christian, I don't know if he is or not. But he did this study and he said that he could predict with 80% accuracy couples from observing them, he could predict with 80% accuracy if they would still be married after 3 years.
After just a short time.
Yeah, so think of that, right? So what is it that he's looking for? What is it that he saw? And he said, the number one thing is not whether or not they fought, it's whether or not they had mutual respect. If the respect is gone, he said, that marriage will end in 3 years or less. So I think the key for fighting fair is how to maintain that mutual respect. So you will fight, and many couples fight differently. Some couples fight quietly. Some couples fight yelling. But once you lose that, if you see the respect go away, you know, lights should be flashing on your dashboard. Whether it's, and honestly, you can, the words coming out of your mouth, and you go, oh, that, wow. You can even hear it in yourself. So.
I'm the S, she's the N, Myers-Briggs, so she's got all the thoughts going.
They have a tough job. I mean, I'm asking them really loaded questions, so a lot of them even attempting to answer any of those.
Yeah, so I learned this actually in my marriage because I did not know how to fight well. My background was when you argued, you went to separate rooms. You were mad at each other, right? So why wouldn't you take time apart? Carol's idea of arguing. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. I would just brood, and then eventually when I could stand being in the same room with that person again, we would then get in the same room, but we wouldn't talk about it. It was hanging there, kind of a thing. So that's what I brought into the marriage. Could you see why Pastor John didn't want to get married there a little bit? Carol brought into a totally different idea of what it means to fight and how to argue well. So what they did in their house is they actually stayed in the same room and they touched each other and they made sure that there was some form of attachment happening. I think what Bart was saying, we men might say respect, but it's just idea of attachment. How do we stay close to one another even while we disagree with each other? Super powerful, and I owe a lot of that to Carol, teaching me how to do that and try to do that well. And we're still working through that to some degree or another. But just this idea, how do you fight fair? You stay attached to each other emotionally. You recognize that that person's not the enemy. One thing we promised real early in our marriage is that we would not do personal attacks. I would never say anything mean about Carol, ever. I asked her on the way, because we knew this question was coming. I asked her, have we ever yet broken that? And so we've not yet, and we both agreed that to the best of our knowledge, we have not broken that. We've not done a personal attack on each other. So staying close to each other, this is what we needed anyways, to touch each other, because then wives, I've learned that, men I should say, I've learned that women need to know that the relationship is safe. If the relationship is safe, then you can go ahead and talk about almost any topic, really.
I have one more thing to say. I have to share something that these guys shared with me. I'll be really quick. And that is, so Laura Lee and I had some issues in our marriage and sat down with Stan and Carol. And Stan and Carol asked us a very, I thought it was a very wise question. Stan said, do you feel like this problem that you're talking about is between you and your wife? And I said, yeah, absolutely, between us. He says, well, you need to put that, and I don't know if you used this visual image or I got this somewhere else, but you said, that's a kitchen table problem. The kitchen table problem is where one person sits on one side, the other person sits on the other side, and the problem's between you and you talk about it, you argue about it. He says that you need to move that from a kitchen table problem to a coffee table problem, where you sit next to each other and look at the problem. I just think that's a brilliant way of looking at it, and that's where you talk about the touch. Okay, we are together in this, and we're looking at this problem together.
That was huge for us to get to that point. Oh, I think also the whole thing of being able to ask for forgiveness and go through that whole process with each other and own up to your own piece that you bring into it helps soften our hearts to be able to keep turning towards each other.
I just got one quick thing too. Is it more important to be right, or is it more important to have a relationship that's healed? So if you want to be right, there's consequences to that. So in your fight, think about that.
Thank you. So, another series of questions, there's a ton of questions. I could sit with all of you for a long time, and but we do need to come and close around that. But a couple more questions here. For those of you who've been married for a while, since the 1800s, I know. So I think, I was just wondering, Bart, I keep asking these questions with him. So, how do you grow closer as you get older, right? And how do you get that, and for those that have been married for a while, the romanticness, the attraction, all those pieces, in a non-sexual way, how do you keep that going, a passion going for each other? Love to hear your thoughts on that.
You don't want to go first all the time.
I can pass on this.
No, that's fine. I would say we're constantly changing, and the things. It's fun to recount. Why did I fall in love with you? Right? I mean, those are fun things, but it's fun. You're fantastic. You're funny. Beautiful. Okay, late. Okay, so, we're being recorded? Is that what you were going to say? Yes, okay, we'll talk about it. We're constantly changing, and those things that I fell in love with Laura Lee over are still there. But there's other things that I constantly discover. And I think it ebbs and flows. There are times that I know where Laura Lee would say she loved me, but she didn't like me a lot. But I'm hoping she likes me now. I mean, it ebbs and flows, and I think you discover, okay, wait a minute. Is it something that I'm gonna fight against, or is it something that I'm gonna celebrate? Steve, I think Steve's analogy on this is really good. He said, I stopped trying to figure out my wife, and I just decided to celebrate her. I think that's been very helpful for us. Did you want to say why you love her?
I do, when we do premarital counseling stuff too, we tell people that there are things that you fall in love with your spouse. There's things that I loved about Art when I fell in love. There's, you kind of love everything about them at first. And then some of those same things drove me crazy, like, crazy. But what's important is if I got rid of those things that drove me crazy, I also wouldn't have Art. I wouldn't have some of the other things that I really appreciate about him. So you gotta take the good and you take the bad and the ugly and learn to appreciate it. And there was a time when I didn't like him very well that I wasn't appreciating those things. So you really have to have a mindset of of learning to appreciate and love that person, and finding when you can list a whole bunch of things you don't like about them, continually focusing on the things you do like about them. And I would say one thing is, you guys said before, find things you like to do in common, and those are the things you can do. Sometimes when your kids are little, you can get away and stuff, but as your kids get older, you can still enjoy those things together.
I would just say some, let's see. I think the word what I'm hearing from Bart and Laura Lee is intentional. Be intentional is really important. I would agree with that fact. You have to be intentional. And for me, being intentional means that I have to be thankful. I think I really resonate with what Dharma said as well. It works in marriage. You have to remember and be thankful for why you married this person. And that's, and gratitude is really, really good idea. Don't, you know, in other words, sometimes we just start taking each other for granted, you know, and I've told Carol many, many times, I fight that. Well, actually, I always tell her, I don't have to fight that because I never take you for granted. And so this longing and this deepness of wanting to be thankful and not taking it for granted, you just do things differently for each other. When you're arguing, when things aren't going well, I'm still thankful for her, and I still don't take her for granted. And I think the thing that Carol taught me the most is continue to move toward. She'd always say, "Move toward me, move toward me." And Larry Crabb, by the way, anybody Larry Crabbers out there at all? So seriously, I know you guys are all Tim Keller people here, but Larry Crabb he's right there with them. The Marriage Builder is the best book on marriage out there. He talks about soul oneness, spirit oneness, and all those other kind of things. And he just really talks about emptying yourself and recognizing that we are self-centered and we have to continually battle that. I think you had mentioned that a little bit. I'm self-centered. How do I battle that? So part of staying engaged, literally, is understanding who you are in Christ, who you are as a sin, and then being intentional. So I mean, that's the big one right there. So.
I have a question for you. Can I clarify something for you, Stan? The question, you said you don't take her for granted. Do you mean you do that naturally? You don't take her for granted? Or are you saying you've decided not to take her? Do you understand my question?
Well, I'm not trying to butter her, I'm not trying for anything later tonight either here. This is the truth here. Carol has been such a blessing to me, and where I've come from, and what she has taught me, and we always say I'm married way up. And so it's been very, very easy for me to not take her for granted. So I think actually, I want to be intentional on that, but in this case, it's actually pretty natural.
But he does have those moments where he's not like to move things. We all have those moments. The only thing I think I would add to that is just trying to move through that each phase of life, trying to think, how do I minister to this person now? Because that, I think, helps keep us, gets you through those days when you don't like each other, gets you through those days when you think they're the best, and so it keeps focusing on what does God want us to do for each other, and then help. That's the only thing I'd add to what everyone else is saying.
I have a sheet of 4 papers here. I've gone through half of one of questions, so a ton of questions. But I'm going to pause here and ask the audience for your questions. And we'll about maybe do about 7 or 8 minutes, so maybe 2 to 3 questions. So, what questions do you have on any of the things we've talked about, including singleness, dating, marriage, from the audience here?
Why don't you say your name and
yeah.
So my name is Ian, I'm single. But my question pertains to kind of talking about marriage here. And as I look to my parents and kind of their example in marriage, there are a lot of things they do well, but I don't want to say more than not, but there are a lot of things that they struggle with and have to work on, and they have both been pretty open about those things with me. But seeing my parents struggle with some of those things, I was wondering how you guys have dealt with the struggles of your parents and marriages, and how sometimes we can, without wanting to, reflect some of the things that our parents, when they raised us, just some of those lessons. But how have you said, okay, these are the things that I would like to take into my marriage, and these are the things from my parents that, I love them to death, but I just can't have this in my marriage. And what's your advice for that
again, I would say that just even asking those questions, that you're being very wise. Because you're standing back and saying, okay, I have a construct and I have, you know, backstage passes to this marriage, and so what is it? I think it's just really wise to do that. I do think setting those things up, I would caution you to be careful, to not use phrases like, I will never do that. I will never do that, because I think that sets up opportunity for pretty hard failures. But saying, I want to turn from that, and I want to do this. And realize, I think in my own life, I tend to reflect my dad. And when things get rough, that's where I retreat to. That's what I end up doing. When I feel strong, more intentional, more on my game, do what I'm reaching for the things that I want in my marriage. So I also think there's a point in our lives where we start off a marriage and we think, okay, these are all the things that we're not going to do, and then there's a point where you trip over and you say, okay, there was a lot of things that they really did well. Thank you for that. And that's starting to happen in my life right now, where it's just like, okay, wow, you guys really have done some amazing things, and so just that gratitude too. So that's helpful.
Bart and I got married, both coming from small Christian families, and we thought our families were so alike. We really thought our families were alike, and that lasted about a month until when we realized the construct of our family was vastly different. Besides being Christians, they didn't really have much in common. And so, but remember that there are things that you can look up to in your parents' marriage and things you don't like, but you're not marrying your mom, right? And you're not your dad. And so you're gonna have two different people than your parents with two different backgrounds and baggage and personalities that are come into a marriage that are gonna look different and feel different. And so caution not to compare too much, because then you might pigeonhole your wife into turning her into your mother and, oh, I don't want this, and we've done that a little bit, because I'm like a lot like my mom and he's a lot like his dad, and we always laughed and said they would never get married. And the older we get, the more we're like our parents, and we're married, so we're figuring it out.
Yeah, history matters. We do that in the premarital class. I just going through that. So I think, like Bart said, just the fact that you're asking these questions and that you'll be deliberate in checking off what are the things you want to strive to be different in. God will help you break those patterns.
He just says we are supposed to lead and cleave. So what you're really asking is, how do you lead well and how do you cleave well? So that's really where that's going.
There's probably two more questions.
Lead and cleave.
My name is Mauricio. I am married a week ago. So Martin and I recently got married, and all our friends are still single. And we've been talking about and like trying to figure out how that works when all our advice, all our friends are single, and that's where our advice is coming from. How to build our relationship without forsaking or without ignoring other people.
Singles or married?
I'm sorry, I'm driving the mic on this one. So one thing that I will say, I'll try and be quick. The fact that you're surrounded with a community of people, it is critical when you're married. It is critical to have a community around you that pushes you together. Okay? So if you find that your friends are saying, well, you deserve better, or you should tell her this, you need to squelch those voices. How come you don't hang out with us more? Yeah, or how come you don't, yeah, right. How come you don't hang out with us more? And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. They need to be pushing you together. I think that's just critical. You have to have accountability and transparency relationships with other couples that push you together. It will save your marriage. So take that seriously.
That's point number 5 up there. It's working. There you go. Other questions? Over here, thank you.
So in the video that Tim Keller had, one thing that kind of took me a little bit by surprise was how he talked about divorce and talked about, yeah, like there's a point at which that's the best option moving forward. And I guess kind of that seems maybe opposite or contrary to what I've kind of heard or been told. And I think Stan, you specifically said, like, I want to find somebody with whom divorce is not an option. I guess, like, how do those two thoughts get reconciled? Can they be, are they kind of looking at it in different contexts, or just thoughts, I guess, about divorce?
Yeah, well, first of all, I didn't see the video. So I don't know what the context of Tim Keller and why he was saying that. I think that's a big piece. What was his reasoning for that? Because if I know Tim Keller a lot, he believes in covenantal marriage. So there is this, well, I'll say it this way, Carol would talk about this quite a bit as well, so I'll let her speak to this, but there are some things that happen in marriage that are just horrible. And we talked about even earlier today in our marriage class about, we talk about staying married or we talk about sex, we're not talking about things such as abuse or harm, I mean emotional harm, physical harm, those types of things. I'm not saying that you should stay in that marriage in any way at all. When I talk about covenantal marriage, I'm talking about a marriage that just has its ups and downs and swings and hard things, but not things to that to that degree is how I would try to reconcile those two. You're gonna say something?
Well, I just think a lot of times people get divorced over issues that it's not, we're not going through the process of being selfless and trying to give to the, both people kind of doing that. So people give up maybe too quickly because it's an easy out, so.
And abuse and those type of things are not.
Yeah, we're not, yeah.
So I think when I've heard Kelly, he's talking about more of the abuse issues.
Okay. We do need to wrap up here, so I know there's tons of discussion going in the PEP off-road today's meet. So what we're going to do is we're going to post them on the city and have feedback from anyone here respond to that. Keep the conversations going. I just want to really thank, these are my mentors, my friends, really thank them for all they have done. So just thank you. Give them a round of applause.
All right, just a few things. We've got the retreat coming up, January 9th and 10th. Try to make that a priority. I know it's kind of right after Christmas and New Year's, but if you're in town, it's going to be a lot of fun. Do you want to say anything about the retreat at all? Or?
It's so this next few months are going to be busy. So this in November through about February, you'll be reading large swaths of the Old Testament.
Woo!
And so swaths, is that
Swaths again?
Yeah. So but we're gonna not do the whole reading, but you're gonna read large portions and gain themes out of it. And so this area of gospel sexuality, gospel relationships is going to be concluding after Drew's session next month, and then we'll continue. So be prepared. We're going to give you an extra month, not just the retreat, to read things for the retreat. I know there's a lot of holidays.
Yep. And then next month there's no reading book wise, but a lot of scripture. So just be aware of that. So don't be looking for a book or something like that. So. There's new payment methods. Did you have a slide or something? So it's on the other side. Yeah, on the side of the board. Spin that around. So there was something in the city. You guys got an email or something in the city. So this is for the sign-up forms. If you guys are familiar with that. So you can pay online and do all that stuff. That way we don't get the bottleneck line out in the hallway each month. So. You can go on there, you can do it, there's a link on from the city, right? And then you can only still pay with cash and pay with check out, we'll still be able to do that. But those of you who are paying with card, I want to encourage you to do that just because you don't have to mess with it anymore. I don't think there's like an auto payment, you probably have to do it month to month or whatever, yeah. So, all right, so that's that. Well, yeah, and then Rob has a lot of books on the lobby, you might have saw them when you were might have seen them when you were out there. So anyways, what he's doing with that is kind of like a little not a rent. I don't know why I said that. Use your words. It's a library, is exactly what they do. So anyways, he just has a piece of paper out there, just sign up who you are, and what book you took. And he's got books out there about relationships and marriage and dating, singleness, homosexuality, whatever that may be in that category. And then he also has books related to next month's topic with discipleship. I did want to just ask, do you guys have any books that you would recommend? I know you've mentioned a few of them, but yeah. Marriage Builder by Keller, right?
No, that one's
that's right, crap. Do you guys have any other books that you would recommend?
For how to fight fair, there's one called How to Argue So Your Spouse Will Listen. It kind of has a lot of attachment and fighting.
Let me, can I close in prayer for here, and then we can, I'll stay aside for a good 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Eventually then I'll need to come home for my wife and kids, so. Suppose bow our heads here, and dear Lord and Father, God, we just thank you for calling us your children and making us children of Abba Father, for making us brothers and sisters